Hello everyone and welcome. Today's review, we are taking a look at the Axiom disc's tempo. So if you haven't heard of the tempo, it's classified as a putt and approach style disc, but being a speed 4, it's in that awkward space of like, is it a putter or is it a mid-range? I also had a lot of questions, tempo versus a zone. Well, don't worry, I do have a comparison against the zone a little bit later on in the video. So let's go ahead, kick things off by taking a look at the profile and the feel of the tempo. First, with the profile, it is a very thin profile and a very flat flight plate, giving it a really shallow feel, which I personally love out of kind of that semi to overstable approach disc. So with that slender profile, it doesn't quite fill the hand with my backhand grip. However, with that really flat flight plate, the shallow feel, I have no issues at all pinching the flight plate between my pointer and thumb. And for forehand, it feels absolutely amazing with that thin profile. And as you can see, this thing is super flexible and gummy, making it perfect, honestly, for kind of cooler temperatures, but not so gummy that it's going to melt in your hand on those hotter days. Also, being that flexible, where it hits the ground, it's going to stick. It's not really going to kick up and roll on you. Love that aspect of this plastic. So I apologize, rambled on a little bit too long there as we're getting into the flight of the tempo. Now for us kind of medium, slower arm speed players, I would classify this as an overstable approach disc. For faster arms, this is going to be a very straight, torque-resistant approach disc that maybe just will have a nice, predictable finish just at the very end of the flight. But what I like is it's not super overstable. You can work it on lines like an Anheuser line like this to get around, say, an obstacle, a tree, a bush, or whatnot, and just know that it has enough late stability that you can put it on that Anheuser line. It's going to hold, it'll check up, and then just have a nice little bit of a hyzer at the very end. But it does have enough torque resistance that if you do throw it flat or on a slight hyzer, it's not going to say like flip up to flat or get a lot of turn out of it. It's just going to ride very straight and then have a dependable hyzer finish. And if you do throw it on a slight hyzer like this, again, there's no inkling of it flipping up to flat. It just holds that nice arcing hyzer the entire way. So it makes this just a great windy day approach disc, but then also makes it good for the woods because, again, it's workable. You can work it in that mid-flight, early mid-flight a bit, even if you're a slower arm. So even though it's mostly used as a semi-overstable approach disc, it has a wide variety of different uses. And for beginning players, for intermediate style players, this is honestly kind of the semi-overstable approach disc that a lot of players are missing in their bags. The type of disc that players are wanting the zone to be if you have a slower arm. This may actually be the disc that you want to give a try. And it's not just good for backhand. Even when it comes to the extra torque that you put on the disc with forehand, it still holds up a lot better than I was expecting, giving you just, again, such a wide variety of shots. Well, now we've seen it out in the field, let's go to the course and see how I would use the tempo. First hole, very easy. This is just a stock hyzer shot, and the tempo does this very well. You can trust that it's not going to flip up to flat, so you can hold it out wide and just let its decent amount of glide and that nice overstability kick in. Second shot, again, shows its prowess when it comes to those touch forehand shots. You got to hit that field goal on a hyzer angle in order to get to the basket, and that's exactly what this does. Even with that extra torque from the forehand, it doesn't flip up to flat and ride too far straight. It just keeps that nice hyzer angle. And then if you have more of a straighter gap when it comes to forehand, well then throw it with just a smidge of hyzer or flat, and then it's going to hold a nice straight line, and then just as it slows down, it'll have that slight hyzer finish. But how about in the wind? Because I mean, we've seen it on calm days, but what about the wind? Well, this is about a 15 mile an hour headwind, and it was thrown slight hyzer to flat. You can see it's dancing in the wind, but it still holds that hyzer angle and still fades without much trouble. Even with the extra torque put on from forehand, flips up to flat, again, dances a bit, but then as it slows down, it still has that nice, strong finish. So honestly, still pretty decent even into a 15 mile an hour wind. For putting, I mean, it's going to be good as a windy putter, that's for sure, if you're wanting to use it as a putter, but this thing likes to drop out of the sky, so anything outside the circle, I would not be using this at all because it's just going to drop too fast. For me, I would only use it inside the circle on windy days. Earlier in the video, I promised you a little tempo versus zone action. Well, here we go. So when it comes to the profile, tempo has a slimmer profile, the zone overall is taller, both have very flat flight plates, but what's interesting, even though the Zone is taller, the rim depth is actually thinner than when it comes to the Tempo. So overall, the Tempo doesn't stand as tall, and I think gives it that kind of more shallower feel, but the Zone may actually have a shallower feel despite the fact that it's actually taller. Overall, flight-wise, how do they compare? Well, I mean, the Tempo is going to fly like a very seasoned Zone. In fact, it kind of reminds me of my favorite run of the Zone, and that is actually like the X-Soft Zone. Once you kind of beat it in over the course of a couple of months, it flew exactly how I wanted, and that is how the Tempo flies, and I absolutely love that. It'll hold straighter longer versus the Zone is going to check up quite a bit faster. It's not going to have nearly as hard as a fade, at least not as harsh of a fade. It'll still have a very good solid one compared to the Zone, but the Zone it kind of has this extra gear that as soon as it slows down, it just falls. Versus the Tempo at least is going to still keep pushing forward a little bit. So if you're a slower medium arm, I would say go for the Tempo over the Zone because it is the slower arms Zone. It's what I hope the Zone would be. If you are a big thrower, I mean, if you throw 400 plus feet, you're probably still going to enjoy the Zone more, since with those faster arms, you're going to be able to overcome the torque resistance that the Tempo naturally has, so the Tempo is going to ride too straight and possibly get more turn than you're expecting as well. And lastly, the Tempo does have more glide than the Zone, so you are going to get just a little bit more distance with the Tempo. Overall, I absolutely love the Tempo. If you are a slower medium arm player and the Zone is too much for you, you have to try out the Tempo. The only thing I wish is that it was more readily available, so Axiom MVP, please, 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 let's get more of these out there. They are incredible. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and also if you need to get any new discs, be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com and use code LEFTY at checkout to save 10%. Until the next one, keep banging chains.